Let's meditate with art. I'm starting with a watercolor sketchbook and 3 Arteza watercolor brush pens. I've got my water brush pen with water, of course, and a Sharpie. That's all you need to get started. Go ahead and grab your first color, and it doesn't matter how many colors you use, by the way. I typically use 1 to 3 colors in my art meditations, but use as few or as many as you like. And what I'm doing is counting rows. So I'm planning to have 6 rows across and 4 rows down. And I'm going to add these little flower or bloom bursts onto the page and just sort of evenly space out these shapes as I go. And there's different techniques that you can use your watercolor brush pens in art meditation. This particular one, I am going to line these shapes up in neat little rows. This is very relaxing to me. So my brain really likes seeing small things lined up. And so that's just the kind of day it was for this one. So I started with my purple. Now I've moved on to the mint green. And this is in real time. As you add your shapes, don't worry too much about the technique. Make this really easy. It can help to check your grip and loosen your grip a little bit more than you might typically do if you were doing fine line or more detailed artwork. And now I'm just filling in the gaps with my final color using orange. And I really like how these brush tips feel on the dry watercolor paper. So take advantage of the sensations that you feel or the awareness of the sensations. Now I'm adding a single water drop to each of these little color bursts. And by moving across the page this way, it gives them time to absorb, for the color burst to absorb the water just a little bit. And then I'll go through and blend these. I'm going to start with the mint green since it's the lighter of the 3 colors. And I will, wipe off my brush tip, but that just helps prevent muddying if you start with the darker color and move to light. So I like to move light to dark. And I'm just blending these into almost little circular shapes, not trying to make a perfect circle, just kind of smoothing out the edges. And then the water that is remaining on these color bursts will start to bloom and blend the colors into a nice little blob on its own. This water brush pen on the page feels different. It has a different sensation than the watercolor brush pens did. A little smoother. You feel less of the texture of the paper because you have the water. There's not as much friction. So notice how it feels. Now I'm going to let these dry. I suggest you continue watching the remainder of this video while your artwork dries, and then you can complete this step I'm about to show you and see how I'm using a really loose grip here once your paper's dry. So go ahead and watch the rest of this video, and then you can follow the remaining steps in your own style once your artwork has fully dried. So this took about 15 to 20 minutes to dry. These were small shapes with just 1 water droplet each. I'm loosening that grip again. See how I might even hold the pen in an unusual way. This is not how I write. This is not how I typically hold a marker when I'm doing deliberate, more fine detailed artwork. So similar note that I shared with the watercolor brush pens as well. And this first step, I'm just loosely outlining these watercolor blob shapes with a loose grip, letting this be relaxed and easy. I'm really feeling the sensation of the Sharpie on the page. Here we have a third sensation. A Sharpie feels much different on watercolor paper than the watercolor pens or the water brush. Now I'm loosely creating shapes inside the main shape. I might be following some of the pattern or the color bursting that I see, but letting this be abstract, and it follows my breath and what I see on the page. So this becomes a full sensory immersive experience. And I really get into a nice flow state here. This feels really good. And because I'm following the blobs on the paper, there is a sense of guidance. Like I know I'm moving on to the next shape and then the next shape. And, I know I'm using a Sharpie and I know I'm making scribble marks. So there's some guidelines or boundaries to work within, but there's no pressure for this to look a certain way. I don't know what marks I'll be making or how this will look in the end. So it's nice to have a technique that can surprise you and just feel really intuitive. Now I'm going to add some random scribbles and dots, and I'm not following the shapes in order. This is more intuitive, and as I just let myself move my hand across the paper, I'm tapped into my breath. I'm tapped into the scribble mark sensation and the stippling sensation, or how it feels to create those dots. And you can see it on the paper, but this technique, I start to feel a sense of relief in my brain. And there's almost this balance, this creation of a feeling of balance within that you can then see on the paper. I find the visual effects of this technique extremely satisfying. I find the process relaxing and satisfying. And I'm just going to continue creating these marks until it feels complete. If it's a really chaotic day, or, if it's been a busy day at work, a lot of stress, or whatever that may look like in my personal life, the shapes on the page may end up with a lot more scribbles, line work, hatch marks, things like that. And you can almost see the level of chaos that was in my mind transferred to the paper. This is a pretty average day. I was feeling pretty good, dealing with normal life stuff. I really hope you find this technique easy to do. This is very beginner friendly. Anyone can do this, and relaxing. I really find a lot of relief and satisfaction in this process.